I'd come from a place within society where actually, she'd probably be disadvantaged or underserved, but books were they were integral as part of my childhood. But my mum was very much about books, and she knew it was really important, and she made sure that we were able to read because she made sure that she was able to read.
Welcome to this latest edition of the Leading With podcast. I'm today's host, Nicola Romaine, National English Lead at Twinkl. In today's episode, I'm joined by Kiran Satti, Deputy Principal, Oasis Community Learning, OCL National Lead Practitioner for Reading and Women Ed Network Leader. Welcome, Kiran.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It's so lovely to have you here. Let's start with your journey, I think. Many of our listeners are educators themselves. What was it that inspired you to move on into early reading and literacy leadership at that national level? And how has that path shaped the work the amazing work, I should say, that you're doing now?
So reading has always been my favourite to teach. So ever since I started in Key Stage 2 teaching, I just absolutely loved reading and teaching it. I think my passion sparked for like that deeper interest in reading and early reading when I taught my first nursery class, which never planned to go into early years, but opportunities come and it was, we need you in there, so can you go in there? So I was like, okay, and I absolutely adored teaching those children, completely out of my comfort zone in lots of ways, but that love of nurturing reading and that passion for reading was always there. And I think for me it was being their nursery teachers, not even reception, then walking into education, it was a privilege but also a really big responsibility. So when it came to reading and early reading and what that meant, it was getting them to play with language, getting them to make sure that they were listening to songs, singing to songs, rhyming, all of those listening skills that you sort of take for granted. And I think as I've gone through from there, since teaching in nursery, I've been a lot more attuned to, okay, there's someone in year 3 that hasn't quite got and it's how did that link back to what their starting point was and where are the gaps and how do we sort of move forward to enable them to get to where they need to be. So it was a massive learning curve, but it really ignited that spark, and ever since teaching in nursery I've been reading more about reading more about early reading, any podcast, any webinar, any symposium about early reading. Yeah, I'm learning because it's it's something that I don't think will ever stop growing in terms of pedagogy and theory, and that will always continue to develop as you're wanting to learn more, because every child is different as well. And I think that's the other thing, that when you're teaching in early years, one of the best things about it is getting to know who they are and who they'll become as people, and reading books and getting them to identify certain characters or certain stories or just certain things about a book that they might enjoy could be their catalyst into getting them to learning and understanding why they want to read and learn more. I think playing with language is really important when it comes to the fact that when they are then introduced to the alphabetic principle, because that's what synthetic phonics is, it's just teaching them the alphabetic principle, because they've had so much play and fun around language, they're going to be more confident. That's what I find. So when we started teaching phonics in the summer term with that, I know it's nursery, but it's because of where they'd come from as well, it was important that we started it. It was magical. It was actually magical watching them read a word independently. Yes, there are only CVC words, but that was their spark then, and that is such an amazing thing to be part of, but also really important, because I always go back to Maslow's hierarchy as well. Like, they have to feel safe before they learn anything. They have to feel safe with you and feel safe in that environment. So the joy that came from that for me and the children was just something that I need to make sure that I develop this a lot more, because I loved reading. I always have done. But having that passion to then develop into the pedagogy a bit more and my expertise a bit more was, it was just the best experience ever being placed in nursery when I didn't want to be.
That's so powerful, and just thinking about what that sort of partnership that you had with the children as well, or have had with the children, and how you've grown together. You've learnt your craft by working with them, which is a really sort of like a gift, really, isn't it? And you've been able to provide them with those building blocks. It's just a really powerful story. But your work isn't done in a vacuum, is it? And I know that you've built some incredible partnerships as well. Could you share with the audience a few, maybe some examples of the key collaborations that you've that have really sort of added to your passion and really fueled your interest in this area?
So the Book Trust is one of my favourite organisations, and I met Lizzie Catford at an Open University Reading for Pleasure conference. I'd won 2 awards that day as well, so I think that's why she came over to speak to me. But with her and Rachel Bowden, I shared a bit about what we were doing in terms of parental engagement at the school that I was at, and they wanted me to add my voice to their generational reading cycles work that they were doing, and it's excellent research in the sense of it really goes back to the idea of community. It goes back to the idea of a village being around a child and what that actually looks like. And it goes back to parents don't need to love reading, and they don't need to necessarily be good at reading. And one thing that I'd always found in certain schools that I'd worked in, parents were always quite nervous about reading because they hadn't had the best experience. And I think one of the things that I put forward as part of that interview was, you're always going to have 2 types of generational reading cycles come into your classroom. Just because you love reading doesn't mean that every child is going to have had that starting point. I came from it's single parent family. I wouldn't say I was ever disadvantaged because she's a brilliant mum, but I'd come from a place within society where actually, she'd probably be disadvantaged or underserved, but books were they were integral as part of my childhood. But my mum was very much about books, and she knew it was really important, and she made sure that we were able to read because she made sure that she was able to read. Not every family is going to have role models like that as soon as they start school, and I think it was really important to make it really apparent in that interview. You're going to have 2 sets of families. You're going to have those families who are going to be really hard to engage with, but showing them the importance of reading and shared reading. Every parent will want to do the best for their child, but it's doing it in a way that's non-threatening, that's non-judgmental as well. So the things that I'd already started and I'm doing at Woodview as well is just bringing families in and saying, all we want you to do is just sit with your child. You're not there to read to them or anything like that. And through that, conversations would come about that, I find it really difficult reading, or I'm actually dyslexic and I'm worried about, and it's that once you've got that relationship and that trust with families, they're more inclined to want to know more and want to learn more about reading. And then you'll have the other group of children that will come in that have always had the bedtime stories, who've always had someone read to them, and so they're going to be confident in that reading area or whatever it is as soon as they come into school. But it's ensuring that when they're in the same space as each other, one, they're all equal. There is no judgment in terms of who's had what and who hasn't. But you've got to be acutely aware that they're all at different starting points based on their relationship with books and their family's relationship with books. So the thing that was really paramount about that research was, you need to just show that you like books. If you show that you've got a positive interaction with a book, just holding a book and sitting with your child and that closeness, that's all that you need to do, and the child will probably end up teaching you how to read. So I've got one mum in our Bambinos and book club where she was like, Miss, I've never knew how to read, but now she's there, and it's so intentional that she's there for her Bambi, for her toddler, but it's for her as well, and that it's about that community again, that there's no judgment with it, and for someone to be that honest about their reading journey with you, again, is a real privilege, because you're obviously giving them there's no judgment here, and we're not here to do that. We're here to serve you and your family. So the point of having the children who aren't even through our school doors as part of our reading club every Friday, it tells families that we're investing in you. It's not just about the children and the data and things like that. It's about your relationship with books as well as your family's relationship with books. That initiative that generational reading cycle work has manifested into the Bambinos and book club, but having that partnership at that point really enabled me to develop my understanding of the affective and the behavioural approaches to what reading is, and how we do take it for granted. I think we do take it for granted that they're just going to come in and they've had the experience that I've had, they might not have, and that's okay, but it's then what are we doing to ensure that they do feel safe and they do have that lovely feeling of just holding a book, never mind reading it, just holding it and feeling comfortable with that. The National Literacy Trust, again, it's like an institution, and do lots of brilliant research reports as well. And I think the one thing that's great about the National Literacy Trust is that it's always on point with the research. It's always centred around children. I've always felt that all their research is centred specifically around children. There's not an agenda or anything like that. It's just the harsh brass facts of children's lived experiences of reading. And as we know, like, a lot of work has been done since some of their reports that have come out about the decline in reading enjoyment for children. Yes, I'm part of the Education Advisory Board, which is linked to the National Year of Reading. But I can't say much more than that. So exciting. But yeah, really excited but reserved in terms of my excitement, just because I'm curious to see what it will look like and who it's going to serve. Teresa Kremin, who she's a queen of reading for pleasure, isn't she? But I love her in the sense of, I don't know if you've ever heard her speak at conferences. Like, she's the
Absolutely.
energy that woman has is amazing.
Passion. It's just tangible, isn't it?
But she is not afraid of talking about nuances when it comes to research. It's very easy to have something research-led and make it look pretty in like an audit or something. But it's so important that with reading for pleasure and the pedagogy behind it, if it's about the child and it's child-centred, there are always going to be nuances with it. So that culture of belonging, I believe that's what it is, and equity, and getting the child to understand that they are part of something bigger than themselves is part of that pedagogy that reading for pleasure serves. But what I love about Teresa is that she's so acute and detailed in the data that she shares with you, but then also make sure that it's contextualised in a way that it's understandable for practitioners, for teachers, but also leaders as well. So having her voice as part of the reading framework that came out a couple of years ago, I think that says a lot about her weight in terms of what she is saying, but also that expertise in knowing nuances when it comes to reading for pleasure are absolutely important, and you can't drown that out. It's not something that you then get rid of because it isn't reading for pleasure then. So I think I respect her immensely, and I'm inspired by her every time she speaks as well. But I think it's also about enabling people to understand that reading for pleasure is the bedrock when it comes to developing children's proficiency in reading. You can't have the will you can have the will and the skill together if you're lucky, going back to the generational reading cycles, but if they don't have the will to want to read, the skill is hard to nurture in a child because they obviously don't feel safe with books. They probably feel like they're going to fail, so what's the point? And then they'll choose other behaviours. So the behavioural aspect of reading for pleasure pedagogy links in really well with cognitive, because if they are struggling, then and that's why I'm so excited about the role that I have, because I know from my classroom experience, there were certain, and I don't want to generalise to boys, but there were certain boys who I got them in year 2 and I was like, it's make or break, in the sense of either we switch him on or we're going to lose him when he gets into key stage 2. And I had, when it came to it, the boys were, I can't read, miss, or I don't like reading, or I don't see myself as a reader. And I'm probably the worst teacher to have said that to, because you're on my, not hit list, but you're on it, and you're going to love reading in some way. But so one of the children that I'm thinking of, he became the focal child in my chapter for the reading teachers book that was out. And it goes back to Teresa's idea about it's humane. Reading for pleasure pedagogy is about humanising children. So audits and things like that are there to enable you to develop a certain strategy, yes, but it doesn't enable you to develop a culture, and that's very different because it's child-centred. So the things that we're doing at Woodview and things that I've done in previous schools about reading for pleasure worked there because it was about the community engaging those children. And I think that understanding of culture and belonging, but that means that you've got to understand the cultures within your school. You've got to understand the families within your school to enable that to flourish. It can't just be an audit or a tick list, which is why I'm interested about the National Year of Reading. I don't know how it's going to manifest into policies and things like that, and whether it will have the humanising pedagogy of reading for pleasure at the heart of whatever comes out of it.
Can I pick up on that with you, the National Year of Reading? So we don't know what the policy around that is going to look like at the moment. But when it comes to your role and leading early reading across, Oasis Community Learning, for example, what is your, what are your hopes and wishes for the National Year of Reading? What do you think it is going to, what would you like it to be enable, if you like, for you in your role and for your community of parents and children across the trust?
Accessibility to language and books. I think one thing that I've noticed about working in some of the schools that I've been at is that they almost felt forgotten. So why don't want to say cynical, but I suppose like, will the National Year of Reading really pick up on those communities that are truly underserved, that almost feel like they have been forgotten? And that does link to certain social climates, that does link to certain political climates as well. Like it's such a integral part of empowerment, I believe, when you're in education. And obviously not every child or every adult who's come out of the education system has felt that way. So it's that accessibility to language, not necessarily just in terms of books, but in terms of that empowerment of what it means to be a learner. And National Year of Reading, for me, reading is about access to a curriculum. It's part of that cycle of what makes it important. But again, I go back to the humanising aspect of it, that will those communities that have been underserved for a long time be seen in it? Because I'm not naive, like there are always going to be agendas, but what does that look like, and how are we holding especially the publishing side of it accountable? So again, being part of certain literacy circles, I was privileged to listen to the HarperCollins Publisher Insight Data reports, and children's literature is on the decline in terms of what books they're selling and things like that. But then if you look at the books that are continually being sold, they are of a certain mindset, they are of a certain sort of vision of what childhood looked like. Childhood is very different to what it was like in the Victorian times, and when you've got books like The Secret Garden and Alice in Wonderland still doing well, it's because they can be repackaged in lots of beautiful ways and they're beautiful gifts. It doesn't actually get to the point of what reading is meant to be, and that's about accessibility to the world. It's accessibility. So I think that's a big answer that I've given, but I just don't want it to be a faddish thing next year. I think the National Year of Reading, it'll be, and like it should be the National Year of Reading every year though. So that's what is going to be special about next year, I suppose.
How are we going to sustain it is the question, isn't it? How is it going to be sustainable, and how is it actually going to make a difference to those children and those families, those communities? And off the back of that question, how do you think, or what would your dream be about how parents play into the National Year of Reading? What do you think, what would your vision be around how that would change things for the parents in your community?
Them being seen, I think them being understood as well. So one of the amazing things at the Reading Right Summits in January that Frank Cottrell Boyce has put together was there was lots of people from the safeguarding profession, which I wasn't expecting, but I was impressed with, to be fair, because when I think about underserved and those underserved families, it does come down to safeguarding. I think being a DSL and being reading lead now it's an amazing privilege, and one of the things that I make sure all my DSLs put on their actions is that shared reading is part of that, because they are, if you've got lots of things going on in your life, and again it goes back to that human experience of living, books aren't necessarily going to be the most important thing in that parent's life at that point in the day, because there's lots of other things happening. So that was important, actually, that the safeguarding professionals that were there from the north were part of this Reading Right Summit, because it was about kinship families, it was about adopted children, it was about those that are living in stark poverty. So I think that those families being seen and knowing that they are part of something, they're a part of that community, so that is a big ask, but it's whether that will happen. I think that's the only way that you're going to really sustain and improve child's life chances, if you understand the roots of poverty. And reading is part of that. It's part of that fix and that solution, but it's about understanding those communities as well.
I think it's being willing to dig deeper, isn't it? Yeah. And not just kind of accepting that kind of stuff. We've reached all the families we need to reach, ticking the box. How far down do we need to go? How do we reach those families, as you said, that are in true poverty in every single meaning of that word, really. It's really insightful, really inspiring what you're doing. Your vision is really inspiring, and I think Oasis Community Learning are really, 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 really lucky to have you. So we touched on the reading for pleasure pedagogies. We touched on the work of Teresa Kremin, for example, and those pedagogies that inform your work. I've heard you discuss previously, the book wings experiences in Oasis Community Learning, Dialogic Talk, and the importance of community, which you've touched on today, as well as pupil voice. Can you explain a little bit more around any of those kind of concepts for us?
Yeah, going back to Oasis, I think they've enabled me to become a national lead of literacy. They're a brilliant organisation. I feel like I need to say that's why I'm very lucky to have found Oasis as well. But the Book Wings, I want to start with Book Wings pedagogy in the sense of, like, to me, I was, one of my colleagues actually said it to me and I found it hilarious. But I was like, actually, yeah, that is true. Because when I first got to Oasis and I saw Book Wings in practice as it was, they were like, oh, it's almost like Book Wings has had to prove itself to you. I said, actually, yeah, it did do. But what I love about it is that you've got the rigour, because it's a synthetic phonics program, yes, and an alphabetic principle will be, it's phonics. Phonics is phonics at the end of the day. What's lovely about Book Wings is that it's contextualised with story. It's contextualised with that understanding that that child is whole, and so reading development isn't just something that you can use as one strand. There's lots of different strands that come together to create a reader. So having those experiential stages of learning is absolutely paramount, especially in the earlier settings, because it develops their cognition, it develops communication and language, it develops their curiosity, it develops their love, because I've seen that firsthand, and they're excited. Whenever it's a book wing session, they're really excited. Just that simple, reading a story aloud to them as well, they're getting more vocabulary through that as well, understanding more about stories and the archetypes when it comes to certain characters, certain themes, and just that story arc as well. I think there's so much that happens in a book wing session that if you were to strip it back and you just did the alphabetic principle, you're missing the point of why you're teaching phonics to a child. And being national lead practitioner for reading as well was exciting in the sense of, when we were developing version 2.0 of the reading curriculum for Key Stage 1, I was able to link in certain facets to Book Wings, because the schemas that you are developing, it's not just the phoneme schemas that you're developing, but it's that language, it's that literacy language as well. It's all of those other things that you will need as bedrock for Key Stage 1 anyway. There are certain things that we've now implemented in Book Wings provision where you've got fluency trees and phrasal reading as part of it, because there's got to be an application stage. But again, why are we asking them to apply if they don't understand the reason behind it? It links in with the core values of the trust in terms of character, competence and community as well. And that again links in with certain strands of the Key Stage 1 reading provision that we've now developed, because it all has to link, it all has to marry up in some way. Nothing in reading is ever in isolation, and I think Book Wings sort of cries that out really, really loudly, that nothing is in isolation, because there's always connections to be made. And actually it's fun. It just makes it more fun for them.
That makes all the difference.
They are children.
Yeah. Well, how about dialogic talk? What does that mean for your trust?
So it's something that we're developing. Oracy is very important. I think there's lots of politics around oracy at the moment as well. So I'm going to say it in the sense of, a child needs to know that they have a voice, and I think dialogic talk enables them to use that voice in a way to communicate how they're thinking, what they're feeling, and that's important, just again in terms of a humanising pedagogy. But dialogic talk for me is essential when it comes to getting a child to share what they're thinking and being that interconnected reading community. As a teacher, one thing that I always made sure that I did was have those children have an opinion, even if it was that they didn't like the book or they didn't like it. Was really important that they had an opinion, because their voice mattered. And the children that are shy or don't feel like talking, I think, I won't bring in gender politics today, but one thing that I'd also noticed as well, when you'd got to a certain stage in primary, the boys always had an opinion, and it was amazing. It was absolutely fantastic that they did, but it was to the detriment of the girls almost losing their voice. But if you watch girls and boys in Key Stage 1 and earlier, girls tend to be more confident actually. So it was almost thinking, okay, somewhere in their primary education they've become quieter for some reason. So dialogic talk is a space where everyone has a voice and everyone is expected to use it. If you've got a non-verbal child, obviously they're not going to be able to articulate in the way that the other children are, but there will be ways for them to almost be part of a conversation. So it could be through your widget symbols, it could be through facial expressions, because when we're talking about talk and communication, I think you've also got to think about the fact that children are nuanced. Everyone has their way, and also it's about you enabling them to find their way of communicating for them. What's the best way for them to do it? So dialogic talk for me is an enabler. It's about them understanding to develop their listening skills further as well. And when you get them to talk, so one thing that we've started to use as part of the Key Stage 1 provision for reading was Explain Everything. So it's a way to use technology where, say you had like a grid of words and you were asking the children to rank those words to describe a character. What it enables you to do is in real time, rather than writing it all down, the children are discussing, well, I disagree, I think it's here rather than there. And then the strength of feeling, the strength of understanding what that word means, how it links in with inference. It enables them to think deeper and respect each other's thinking as well. It's not something that only a few people should be able to do. It's what everyone should be able to do because you're part of a community. So that's something that's always stayed with me as a leader as well, like moving into staff meetings and things like that. It's like, well, those people haven't spoken enough, so how am I going to make sure that I'm getting them to talk as well or share their thinking? Because the fact is we are all human, and I always go back to that idea that we are all humans and we're all thinking something, and it's really important that those thoughts are heard, because otherwise you're not going to be able to understand each other better. So when it comes to sharing certain books around lived experiences, if it be kinship family or refugees, it's really important that they're hearing a lived experience through that story. But what are they internalising? What are they then wanting to articulate? Do they feel safe enough to articulate exactly what they're thinking? Because that's the point of reading, that's the point of education, that they're there to find their voice and shape their learning. That is what it should be. And dialogic talk is definitely an enabler for that. And it links in really well with Reading for Pleasure because, again, it's about pupil voice and choice. Like, they need to be able to articulate why they're choosing certain stories. Do they understand why they're choosing that story? It might just be because they've seen their friends and they want to, that's their way of feeling belonging. I just think it opens up a lot of avenues and pathways, and it's so important. And I think we take the politics out of it. It is about a child's voice. That's the centre of that, is that it's about a child's voice. Oracy is about children using their voices, and if we just see it as simply as that, it becomes a lot easier to implement.
So you are leading across a large trust. How do you ensure that you've got that consistent approach? How do you ensure that you can support that consistency, that you can support implementation and have an impact across such a wide network of schools? Because it's brilliant what you're telling me, by the way. It's just fantastic. I'm just interested in hearing like how you sustain that, if you like, across such a broad sort of spectrum.
So no one should be done to. I think that's really important. Even though I'm lead of early reading, I'm not in charge of it. And I think that's really important, that no one should ever feel done to in any sense of the word. And there's expertise across our trust, which is amazing. So I see my role fitting in, like, there's a spectrum of expertise there. And so I'm in between our early years national leads, and I'm in between our English NCL as well. So Callie, she's almost like the gardener in the sense of, like, she's planting the seeds in terms of oracy, in terms of serve and return conversations, that high quality interaction with children, all that rich vocabulary and language. And whereas Lucy, who's English, is very much about moving it on in terms of comprehension skills, in terms of the fluency. And then where I'm sitting, it's part of that expertise that we have across our trust, and ensuring that the gaps are being plugged, really. So fluency is part of my remit, so I would be thinking, well, phrasal reading would probably be the way that I would go in, because if a child can't read in phrases, then the fluency isn't going to develop. What is it before the phrasal reading that they've got stuck on? Is it something in terms of implementation of the phonics scheme? Is it implementation of how we're reading aloud to children? Are they hearing prosody? Are they hearing intonation? Are they comfortable reading aloud? Are they able to articulate the words? Are they able to use their mouth properly? So then I'm going back into early years, like, what are we doing in terms of how we're scripting certain ways to articulate sound, using your tongue, using your teeth where they should be. So I think it's an exciting part around, because it's about the children becoming literate, whereas you've got, like, the gardeners sowing the seeds, you've got then the English leads, the reading and writing leads, who are developing that competency in terms of English and literacy. But I think it's really important that it's about being literate and understanding what that means for every child. So as part of how it would be scalable, I suppose, is that there'd be a regional suite of CPD where it's literally you know, everything that I know, I want to share. So it will be in that national suite of CPD, looking at how study hall would link in with that. So study hall is like accelerated reader, but a lot more than accelerated reader. And it's linking it back to that reading for pleasure pedagogy in terms of a child understanding who they are as a reader. So there's lots of different facets, but I think it's really important that we're always interconnected, and that collaboration is really, really important. Then the next level down is the sort of regional suite, because if there's certain patterns, so we're getting a data dashboard. I've never been excited about data except for like this sort of data. And so you should be able to track certain patterns that are forming, like it might be on the phonics tracker, it might be on the study hall in terms of like the zone of proximal development ranges of reading, like why are certain children getting stuck. And I think part of this role is about being curious as to what things are working, yes, but why aren't they working for the children? Is it because of implementation? Is it because they're a new school that have joined us and don't really get book wings pedagogy just yet? So do we need to do more in terms of CPD that way? But it's never done to, and I think it's really important that whoever you're working with, they're part of that journey with you. I am not the oracle of early reading. That isn't what it is. We are there to enable each other to develop expertise so that everyone becomes an expert in reading, so that every child in our trust, it's 54 schools in our trust, I think there's about 30 primaries, they're all getting the equitable deal, and that will mean that you're going to have to contextualise certain bits of CPD as well, but you're not going to be able to do that unless you understand, going back to what we said earlier about the community that you're serving, because it might be that they're not comfortable yet and they're not ready yet, so developmentally they might not be where they need to be, and then linking it into Key Stage 2 practice as well. So whenever I've done phonics training, the Year 6 teachers are there as well. They always have been, because it's important. Yes, you're not in early years and Key Stage 1, but there are certain foundational elements, like to the point of like syllable awareness is one of the first like tenets of like phonological awareness. But that is something that you would have to develop constantly. It's not just that it happens in early years, it's something constant, that when they get into doubling consonants and the spelling rules there, they understand it's because there's a short vowel sound. When you're introducing split digraphs, do they understand what a consonant and a vowel is? Because you would always need a consonant between your split vowels. So it's all of those like details that I think, because I've been reading and my teaching, I've always been really great at teaching reading, but I think it's because I've just loved teaching it. But it's because I never stop learning, because there's always going to be a child that you come across and you think, oh, I haven't come across that yet. I'll need to do a bit more learning about it. And I think that ultimately is what I'm hoping will happen with this, that you'd inspire these teachers to the point where they'll enable themselves, they'll want to read a bit more. There are certain texts that I want everyone to be aware of, and I'm starting to develop sort of CPD packages around that, so it's sort of like mini bites of that book, and then hopefully it'll be in a CPD library. But it's about enabling and never being done to. But that consistency in approach starts with the collaboration on the national level, and knowing that whatever I say, Callie would say, whatever Lucy would say, I was. So it's making sure that we are collaborative in our approach, and there's that shared understanding of why we're doing this, that shared language as well, so that when I'm talking about serve and return, a Year 6 teacher should already know what that means, because they understand in their earlier settings. If there are then gaps within an academy, that's where you'd contextualise it and look really specifically at what we're doing for that academy. But the national suite of CPD, the regional suites of CPD, and then looking at patterns would hopefully enable us to implement it in a way that there's consistency in approach, yes, but also the impact is there on the child's life. It is about their life chance, really, because
That's amazing. And some words that I'm sort of pulling out from what you're saying is like being curious for every child as well. And, you know, like you said, looking at issues you may not have come across before. What are those blockers? What are those barriers to reading? And also, you know, that accessibility and that consistent approach are coming through really, really strongly from what you're talking about. Okay, so what's next? What is next for your work at Oasis? So thinking about the new term, if you like, I would imagine that it's going to be sort of some CPD, that sort of thing.
Yes, so always busy, but we are really excited that we'll be in our second phase of Bambinos and Books at Woodview. So that's something that I'm very passionate about, getting more mums in. I've got like my army of mums ready to share the news and how we're going to make it even better next year. So we'll do a bit more work with Laura Henry Allen who I have to say is the only author that I know has like written books about kinship families. I don't think there's any other, unless I'm wrong, so I'm more than happy to be told I'm wrong. So she's really important in terms of being part of our reading culture, yes, but also what we're offering as an academy. Obviously the advisory board as well, which I am excited about.
I'm sure you are. Yeah. Sounds very exciting.
I just know I'll be one of those that will ask certain questions, so I'm hoping we'll get the answers. And there's a reading symposium that's been developed as well with 7 stories. So Richard O'Neill is another author that I've worked with previously, has been our author in residence at Woodview, once shown with the other academies now in our region as well. We've done lots of work on vocabulary and root words and the origins of root words as well, and how there's lots of links between different languages, which has been amazing for our children. But the reading symposium is almost it's provocations for teachers, for publishers and for children as to why is reading for pleasure so important. And sort of we're in the organic stage of how that's going to develop as well. So in June next year we'll have something there to share with people. I'm really excited about the early reading role as well, and just getting to work with more teachers and I think learning more as well. I think with a role like this, such a privilege, and it's making sure that everyone is going to be on that journey with me when it comes to reading. I will not hide my passion. It's not going to be something that I'd be able to do.
You can't hide your passion, Kiran.
But
it's really palpable.
But I hope that's what sort of sparks the others within this organisation, because I think it's already there, but I think you either really love reading because you've had such a good experience with reading and what it means for you, or you're just not that bothered. But I think when it comes to children's life chances, that's the drum that I'm beating, that this is about the children's life chances, and reading is absolutely integral to that. It's so important, and I can't wait to see hopefully how the expertise would develop within our trust
really exciting
forward. So
and it's not negotiable, is it, at all?
Not with me, no.
Thank you so much for an incredibly insightful conversation. You are absolutely oozing with passion about reading, and Oasis are really, really lucky to have you in that role. Thank you for sharing with me today.
Thank you
Great
for having me.
You.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kiran.